you've seen him before. He could be the guy with the flashy car and no direction, the one who's always telling you how brilliant he could be. If only the timing were right, if only people believed in him, if only the world wasn't so unfair. He lives in a fantasy but cloaks it in charm. He's bold, magnetic even, in those first few encounters. He knows how to talk. He knows how to impress. But pay attention, and the cracks start to show. Behind the carefully crafted image is a man who's still waiting for permission to become himself. A man who's never truly left boyhood behind. And while society might laugh it off, labeling it a phase or harmless immaturity, Carl Jung saw it differently. He called it what it really is: the puer aeternus, the eternal boy. But before we go deeper, write in the comments where you're watching this from. Let's see who's really paying attention, because this message isn't for the comfortable. It's for the ones standing on the edge of something unfamiliar, staring down the parts of themselves they know they can't carry any longer. This isn't just about age. It's about spirit. The puer aeternus is the man who refuses the weight of existence. He resists reality at its most essential level. He doesn't just avoid responsibility, he resents it. He trades discipline for dopamine, loyalty for novelty, and truth for whatever keeps the illusion alive a little longer. He may look like he's in motion. He's always chasing something, a new thrill, a new dream, a new identity. But in truth, he's stuck, paralyzed by the fear that growing up will mean giving up the fantasy of being exceptional without having to earn it. You might find him anywhere. Sometimes he's the underachiever who can't hold a job. Other times, he's wildly successful, at least on paper. But real maturity isn't about income or image. It's about character. It's about facing the parts of yourself you'd rather avoid. And this is exactly what the pure refuses to do. He runs from his shadow. He builds a life out of distractions, addictions, performances. And the longer he avoids his own depth, the shallower he becomes. Not just in relationships, but in spirit, in soul. This isn't just a personality type. It's a crisis. Because at its core, the puer aeternus is someone who is spiritually starving. He's desperate to feel whole, but terrified of the process that wholeness demands. That process is painful. It requires sacrifice, accountability, self-confrontation. But it also offers something no fantasy ever could: integration, real freedom, power that doesn't depend on external validation, love that isn't performance-based. But to get there, he must be willing to grow up. And that's the one thing he's built his entire life around avoiding. Because growing up means taking off the mask. It means surrendering the dream of being special without effort and stepping into the reality of being whole through work. It means looking at yourself not as a victim of the world, but as someone responsible for shaping it. So now let me ask you this. Think about the men in your life. Your father, your brother, your friends. Think about yourself. Who was still hiding? Who was still waiting to be saved instead of doing the saving? Who is still outsourcing his purpose, his identity, his masculinity to people who never had the right to define it in the first place? Because this isn't just about them. It's about all of us. And what comes next will uncover exactly why this pattern is so seductive and how modern life rewards it. Carl Jung believed that every man carries an unconscious imprint of the feminine within him, what he called the anima. But when a man is psychologically tied to the mother figure, both externally and internally, that anima doesn't develop into strength, empathy, and wisdom. It mutates into something far more dangerous: dependence, passivity, and emotional confusion. This is the heart of the mother complex. The pure Eternus often isn't raised to become a man. He's raised to remain a boy, not always by a malicious or neglectful mother, but by a system that teaches him to prioritize comfort over challenge, safety over risk, approval over authenticity. He's praised for being agreeable, punished for showing aggression, discouraged from taking up space. He's taught to be likable, not powerful. And as he grows, this conditioning calcifies. He starts to internalize the voice of the mother, not as a guide to maturity, but as a ceiling he cannot break through. You'll hear it in his self-doubt. You'll see it in his hesitation to lead, to initiate, to take meaningful responsibility. He either avoids women entirely or clings to them as the emotional center of his world, expecting them to heal him, hold him, mother him. And when they can't, he resents them. He doesn't know how to be alone. He doesn't know how to suffer productively. He only knows how to seek relief. Modern culture reinforces this paralysis. We glorify the emotionally wounded man, the tortured genius who can't get his life together. We make rebellion look virtuous, as long as it doesn't lead to actual leadership. We call immaturity vulnerability. But there's a difference between honest self-expression and self-indulgent avoidance. There's a difference between feeling your pain and making others responsible for it. Masculinity isn't toxic. Infantilized masculinity is. And the longer men stay stuck in the pure stage, the more resentment, confusion, and chaos they create. Not just in their own lives, but in the lives of everyone around them. Because the puer doesn't just destroy himself, he drags others down with him. And the system is fine with that. A man who never grows up is easier to control, easier to market to, easier to pacify. But not every man chooses to stay there. Some reach a breaking point, a crisis, a moment where the cost of staying the same finally outweighs the fear of becoming something more. And when that moment comes, the real work begins. Because escaping the mother complex doesn't mean rejecting women or rejecting softness. It means embracing the part of you that is capable of holding your own pain. It means developing your inner father, the part of you that disciplines, guides, and protects. The part that says, we go forward anyway. The man who wants to be free must reclaim this authority, not from others, but from within. Let's talk about how he does that. Every man who remains trapped in the archetype of the puer Eternus eventually hits a wall. It may arrive as a failed relationship, a financial collapse, a deep depression, or the terrifying realization that time is moving forward, but he is not. This moment is often called a crisis, but Jung would call it initiation. Because it is only when the illusions of safety and eternal youth are shattered that a man begins to confront reality as it is, not as he wishes it to be. This is the threshold, the boundary between the comfort of passivity and the burden of responsibility, between fantasy and form. The puer resists this crossing with everything he has, because it demands the death of the boy inside. And death, even metaphorical, is terrifying. It requires grief. It requires letting go of the idea that someone else will save you, fix you, or understand you perfectly. It requires becoming sovereign over your own life. Many men try to bypass this pain. They jump from distraction to distraction. New relationships, new goals, new philosophies, trying to find the one thing that will let them grow without hurting. But it doesn't exist. Growth is not clean. It's not aesthetic. It's a breaking, a burning away of everything in you that is still waiting for permission to begin. This is where many give up. They retreat back into what they know, blaming others for their suffering, clinging to the identity of the misunderstood victim. It feels safer. But it's a prison. And the longer they stay there, the harder it becomes to leave. But those who endure the crisis begin to see it for what it is: a sacred rupture, a chance to finally step out of the shadow of the mother complex and into the clarity of adulthood. This doesn't mean perfection. It means responsibility. It means confronting your fears instead of explaining them. It means building a spine instead of begging for support. Jung understood this moment as the confrontation with the shadow, the dark, denied parts of the psyche that contain both the destructive impulses and the raw potential for greatness. To grow, a man must face this shadow. He must see the cowardice, the pride, the laziness, the rage, and not flinch. Only then can he begin to integrate them. Only then can he use them as fuel instead of chains. Because the man who confronts his shadow does not become less dangerous. He becomes more. But now, his danger is conscious, controlled, anchored in principle instead of impulse. This is the turning point. Not when he becomes perfect, but when he chooses to be whole. The longer a man denies the call to grow up, the more severe the consequences become. Not just externally, though failed relationships, career stagnation, and social alienation are common, but internally. The man who avoids responsibility begins to rot from the inside. His confidence erodes, his self-respect dissolves, and worst of all, he becomes bitter, convinced that life has betrayed him, when in truth, he's been running from it all along. This bitterness doesn't appear overnight. It creeps in slowly, disguised as cynicism, as superiority, as contempt. The man who refuses to grow often disguises it with intellectual arrogance. He becomes critical of everything and everyone, especially those who are building, struggling, and failing forward. Because deep down, their courage exposes his cowardice. Their movement is a mirror to his inertia. Jung saw this stagnation as a form of psychic possession, where the ego is hijacked by unconscious patterns. The pure clings to idealism, waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect partner, the perfect purpose. But perfection never comes. Life isn't designed for perfection. It's designed for participation. And the man who waits too long eventually becomes a ghost in his own story, watching from the sidelines as others take risks, make mistakes, and build something real. There is a tragic irony here. The boy inside believed that by avoiding the pain of growth, he was preserving something sacred: his freedom, his uniqueness, his lightness. But in doing so, he destroyed the very vessel that could have carried that light into the world: a mature self. Because freedom without structure is chaos. Uniqueness without discipline is useless. Lightness without weight is forgettable. The cost of avoidance is not just the life you could have lived. It's the respect you could have earned, the integrity you could have embodied, the love you could have received had you been strong enough to carry it. But here's the truth. As long as you breathe, it's not too late. You can't change the past. But you can choose to stop denying what you know deep down to be true. The longer you delay your growth, the more damage you cause, to yourself and to everyone who loves you. Responsibility isn't a punishment. It's an invitation to become someone worth following, worth trusting, worth remembering. And the only way forward is through the discomfort you've spent your whole life trying to avoid. The longer you wait, the heavier the burden becomes. So pick it up now, while you still have the strength to carry it. One of the most overlooked reasons why some men never grow up is the absence of a strong masculine role model. Not necessarily just a biological father, but a symbolic one. Someone who teaches by example, who sets a boundary, who demands more, who says no. Without this figure, a boy grows into a man physically, but emotionally, he stays stuck. He becomes someone who resents authority but craves its structure. Someone who claims to be free but secretly longs for direction. Carl Jung believed that the father is not just a man, it's an archetype. He represents order, principle, discipline, and the bridge to the outer world. When that archetype is weak or missing, the boy develops what Jung called a wounded animus, an internal confusion about strength, purpose, and identity. The result? A man who either overcompensates with aggression or collapses into passivity. He doesn't know how to assert himself without anger. He doesn't know how to take initiative without panic. He becomes emotionally volatile, addicted to control when he has it, and resentful when he doesn't. And it's not just about fathers who are physically absent. Emotional absence can be just as damaging. A father who was cold, distant, unavailable, or worse, present, but cruel. These early wounds create a template, a distorted idea of what it means to be a man. And unless a man confronts this, unless he names the wound and stops pretending it doesn't affect him, he will keep bleeding all over the people who try to love him. This wound shows up in his relationships, in his work, in his moments of silence. He avoids emotional intimacy not because he doesn't want it, but because he fears the vulnerability it requires. He fears being exposed, judged, rejected. He believes deep down that if people saw who he really was, they would leave, just like the father did, or failed to show up in the first place. But here's the hard truth. Healing doesn't happen by blaming the past. Healing begins the moment you decide to become the father you never had. To yourself, to your future. It begins when you stop seeking permission and start offering protection. To your own inner child, to the people around you, and to the man you're trying to become. You can't control the man who raised you, but you can choose the man you raise within yourself. That's how you break the cycle. That's how you finally grow up. If you want to know how mature a man is, don't look at how loud he is in a crowd. Watch how he handles silence. Immature men fear stillness because stillness exposes everything they've worked so hard to avoid. Their insecurity, their shame, their lack of direction. In the noise of the world, they can perform. They can posture. They can hide behind distractions, women, money, substances, bravado. But in the silence of their own mind, that's where the truth lives, and many would rather drown than face it. Stillness is where all false identities dissolve. It doesn't flatter the ego. It doesn't care how many people follow you or how successful you pretend to be. In the silence, the masks fall. The wounds speak. The buried boy shows up. And for the man who's never faced him, that boy is terrifying. Carl Jung believed that what you most need to find will be found where you least want to look. For the immature man, that place is the quiet. It's the mirror he's been running from. Because in that mirror, he sees everything he hasn't built. The values he never defined. The emotional regulation he never developed. The discipline he avoids. The inner life he's ignored. And it's not just discomfort he finds there. It's grief, rage, fear. The realization that the life he's performing isn't the life he respects. But here's the irony. Stillness doesn't break you. It reveals where you're already broken. It doesn't create fear. It unmasks it. And if you can sit with that fear, if you can stay with it long enough without numbing or fleeing, it starts to lose its power. You begin to hear another voice beneath it. The voice of the man you were meant to become. Growth doesn't begin with action. It begins with awareness. And awareness requires stillness. If a man can't be alone with his thoughts, he doesn't own them. They own him. And as long as that's the case, he's not free, he's just distracted. So the next time silence makes you uncomfortable, lean into it. Don't fill it. Don't run from it. Ask yourself, what am I afraid to hear? What truth have I been avoiding? Because that answer is the key to your next level of maturity. And until you unlock it, you'll keep mistaking volume for confidence, movement for progress, and chaos for strength. The strongest men aren't the loudest. They're the ones who can sit in stillness and not flinch. The ones who know that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathes. One of the clearest signs a man hasn't grown up is how he reacts to responsibility. Not responsibility in the superficial sense, like paying bills or showing up to work, but real, internal accountability. The kind that demands you face your own contradictions, admit when you're wrong, and carry the weight of your decisions without blame or deflection. This is where the undeveloped man collapses. Because to him, responsibility feels like a threat, a burden, a cage. It means he can no longer hide behind excuses. It means the mirror won't lie anymore. The immature man seeks freedom without cost. He wants autonomy without consequence, pleasure without discipline, validation without vulnerability. He wants the benefits of manhood without the labor of becoming one. So when life begins to demand more from him, emotionally, morally, spiritually, he resists. He lashes out. Or worse, he plays the victim, because admitting fault would fracture the fragile identity he spent his whole life protecting. Nietzsche understood this well. He saw that most men are terrified of becoming who they truly are. Not because they doubt their potential, but because stepping into that potential would require the death of their current self. And that death isn't metaphorical. It's painful. It requires sacrifice. It means letting go of the stories that comfort you, that you're always right, that the world owes you, that you're a good man just because you feel like one. Growth demands that you tear those stories apart, and most can't stomach the violence of that honesty. So they avoid it. They project their shortcomings onto others. They blame their ex, their parents, the system, the timing, anything but themselves. They wrap themselves in just enough shame to appear humble, but not enough to change. And all the while, they wonder why they feel hollow, why their relationships fail, why they can't find peace or purpose or self-respect. But the answer isn't out there. It never was. It's in the moment a man stops running, when he finally says, "This is mine. This mess, this pain, this failure, it's mine. And because it's mine, I have the power to transform it." That's where growth begins. That's where the boy dies and the man is born. Accountability isn't punishment, it's liberation. Because the moment you own your life is the moment you can begin to shape it. But until you do, no amount of success, admiration, or external approval will make you feel whole. Because deep down, you'll know it was all built on sand, and the wind is coming. Immature men fear depth, not just emotional depth, but intellectual, spiritual, and existential depth. The kind that forces you to sit in discomfort, to wrestle with doubt, to confront yourself without flinching. Shallow living offers something seductive: ease, predictability, control. You don't have to ask difficult questions when you're consumed by entertainment, distracted by pleasure, or chasing short-term validation. You don't have to grow when the surface gives you enough to survive. But survival isn't the same as living. And over time, that shallow existence begins to feel hollow. The thrills wear off. The applause fades. The distractions stop working. And in the silence that follows, many men panic because they've never built the muscle to look within. They've never cultivated the inner life that can hold them steady when the external world stops feeding their ego. Carl Jung warned us, "What you do not bring to consciousness appears in your life as fate." When a man refuses to examine himself, to explore the deeper layers of his psyche, he ends up a puppet of unseen forces, old wounds, unresolved trauma, inherited beliefs. He becomes reactive, erratic, confused by his own behavior. And he repeats the same cycles, not because he's cursed, but because he's unconscious. Depth demands effort. It requires solitude, honesty, and the courage to question everything, especially your own image of yourself. But most men were never taught how to do this. They were taught to perform, to please, to conquer, to suppress. Vulnerability became weakness, stillness became laziness, reflection became indulgence. And so they stayed busy, distracted, shallow. But the danger of a shallow life is that it can collapse the moment reality pierces the illusion. A breakup, a failure, a moment of truth, and suddenly everything falls apart because there's no root, no anchor, no internal foundation to hold it together. And the man who never learned to swim in his own depths will drown in them. True maturity isn't loud, it isn't flashy, it isn't proven through power or performance. It's shown in the quiet strength of a man who knows himself, who can feel deeply without being ruled by emotion, who can stand in uncertainty without crumbling, who doesn't need to be seen to know his own worth. If you want to grow up, you must go down first, into the depths of who you are, who you were, and who you're afraid to become. That's where the transformation begins. And no, it's not easy. But neither is pretending to be whole when you're barely holding it together. The choice isn't between pain and no pain. It's between the pain of growth and the pain of regret. One expands you, the other destroys you. One of the most overlooked signs of immaturity is the obsession with appearing mature. And nowhere is this more evident than in how many men imitate manhood instead of embodying it. They adopt the aesthetics, the voice, the posture, the clothes, the ambition. But none of it is rooted in real identity. It's a performance, a curated facade. And the tragedy is that it often fools everyone but themselves. We live in a world that rewards image. Success is measured in perception, not substance. And for the man who's still trying to find himself, this can be intoxicating. You don't have to build character, you just have to look the part. You don't have to earn wisdom, you just have to quote someone else's. You don't have to face your wounds. You just have to hide them behind a strong jawline and a confident tone. But Carl Jung made it painfully clear. The persona, the mask we wear for the world, is not our true self. And when a man confuses the two, when he mistakes his image for his identity, he becomes trapped. Every compliment reinforces the mask. Every expectation tightens the illusion. And soon, he doesn't know how to be anything else. Because the truth, the fragile, unsure, imperfect truth, feels too risky to show. The result? A generation of men who look powerful but feel powerless, who sound confident but are terrified of silence, who chase respect but secretly feel unworthy of love. This is not manhood. It's a high-functioning identity crisis. And it's one of the reasons many men never truly grow up. They don't know who they are, only who they're supposed to be. Nietzsche warned us of this danger in his concept of slave morality, the adoption of values that serve external masters rather than internal truth. And when a man defines himself by how others see him, by how well he plays a role, he becomes a slave to that role. Even worse, he starts to believe the lie. He forgets there's anything underneath. To become a real man, You have to dismantle the performance. You have to stop asking, "How do I look?" and start asking, "Who am I when no one is watching?" You have to risk being seen in your rawness, your confusion, your vulnerability, because that's where identity begins, not in mastery, but in honesty. There is no formula for manhood, no checklist, no costume that'll make you feel whole. There's only the journey inward and the courage to strip away everything that isn't truly yours. That's not the easy path, but it's the only one that leads to freedom. If you've made it this far, then you already know. Growing up isn't about age, money, or status. It's not about finally checking the boxes society lays out for you. It's about something far deeper and far lonelier. Real maturity is not something the world rewards, because it's not something the world understands. The world celebrates noise, not silence. Masks, not depth. But maturity, true maturity, is invisible. It's not declared. It's lived. A man who grows up in the real sense doesn't announce it. He simply stops needing to prove it. He's no longer obsessed with domination, but with direction. He no longer reacts to every slight, because he knows what he's rooted in. He doesn't need to be the loudest voice in the room, because he's already heard his own voice echo in the silence, and that was enough. But here's the truth. To rebuild the inner world, the world most people never even explore, a man must first let everything false collapse. He has to lose what made him feel strong. He has to face what made him weak. And in the rubble of performance, he must begin again. With presence, with stillness, with brutal self-honesty. That's where maturity is born. Nietzsche knew that becoming who you are is a task, not a gift, not a birthright, a task. One that requires you to kill the fantasy of the man you thought you were supposed to be and begin the work of becoming who you really are. Jung echoed this through individuation, the painful, powerful process of integrating the rejected, forgotten parts of the self into a single, whole identity. Most men never do this. They plateau. They find comfort in being halfway there. But comfort is the enemy of transformation. And anyone who's ever gone through real psychological growth knows. It costs something. You don't just wake up one day and become solid. You burn first. You grieve the version of you that only knew how to pretend, and then you build. What does a mature man look like? He looks like someone who's stopped running from his past, from his pain, from himself. He's not fearless. He's just walked through enough fear to know it won't kill him. He doesn't chase control. He chooses peace. And most of all, he lives by something deeper than appearance. He lives by truth, and that's the final step, to stop living for impressions and start living from essence. Because in the end, the man who stands the tallest isn't the one who's admired the most. It's the one who can face his reflection without flinching, who can sit in silence and not hear the echoes of a life unlived. This is the mark of a man who's finally grown up.